Hello, everyone. Welcome back to St. Louis Teens. We are here today with Joy Nesbitt, who is co-president of BlackCAST, the Harvard Black Community and Student Theater Group, and former inclusivity chair of the Harvard Black Student Association. Joy, you're recently named the Mitchell Scholar of 2021. Congratulations, and thank you for your leadership and service to the Black student community.
Thanks.
Joy, thank you so much for being here with us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what inspired you to go into social anthropology, theater, and music?
Yeah, I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, which is where I'm at right now. And I went to the Hockaday School, which is an all-girls community, all-girls school in Dallas for all of my life. And throughout that process, I became really acquainted with the fact that I'm really obsessed with people and connecting to people through art. And so I started making music when I was really young, and obviously, young kids who do music oftentimes get involved and tangled up in theater. So I got tangled up in this theater kid space, started to do shows at camps and doing shows at school, and kind of just exploring the ways in which music and theater spoke to me and my identity, as well as speaking to some of my friends who I was connecting with. So when I got into Harvard, I had taught myself how to play guitar and had been taking voice lessons for a while, and then had been doing some theater here and there in Dallas. So I got to Harvard and was like, maybe I'll maybe I'll study be pre-med and like do the whole music and theater thing on the side. It'll be fun, and that'll be my 4 years. But at the end of my freshman year, I realized that the reason why I wanted to possibly be a doctor is because I was cared a lot about people, but not necessarily because I cared that much about the science. So I finished and I was like, I don't, this feels like I'm forcing myself into this space that doesn't really make any sense for me and what I want. So I decided that I was going to try something new. And sophomore year, I declared anthropology as my degree because somebody had told me that it was like considered to be deep hanging out with people and learning about identity and culture and where we come from. Um, and so I decided that I was going to do that. And then I was like, well, I mean, I might as well throw music in there. So I double concentrated in music and social anthropology. And it's been a really wonderful journey to like learn and grow as an ethnomusicologist. Um, and in between that, Harvard has a really interesting space of being right next to the American Repertory Theater. And so uh, I did a show at the ART my freshman year, and it was like on a big stage that I had never been on in a professional theater, but it was a student production. So I was like, this is crazy. I've never done anything like this. Um, and then sophomore year, I started directing. I music directed a show, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea that like, as a director, you get to curate a piece of art that speaks to a human experience and that invites people in to really interrogate themselves as well as the characters that are being presented in front of them. So then the rest is history. I just started, doing music, wrote an EP, and then was directing all over the place, and then working on my anthropology and music grind. And it's been really amazing and spectacular.
And Joy, each year only 12 students nationally are selected for the George J. Mitchell Scholarship to spend a fully paid graduate study in Ireland. Can you tell us your keys to success and what is one of the most important experiences in college that helped you the most?
Yeah, I think in terms of keys to success, I think listening to yourself is important. I think there's never a time in which you should feel that you're missing out on something when you're doing whatever you're doing academically or career wise. It should always feel like this is what I should be doing at this moment. And like, I feel prepared to stay up until 2 in the morning to finish what it is that I'm doing. Like, there have been nights that I have not slept just because I wanted to get a show perfect. And I think if there were nights when I was doing science where I was like, I could go to bed right now and I won't learn anything else. So that drive was definitely something that I had to learn. And I think as a result, in doing things that I cared deeply about, I was able to like do well in the things that I cared the most about because I was doing the most work. I also think that, like, in terms of when you do whatever you're going to do, you have to allow yourself to go through a process. You can't, if you don't get it on the first try, you don't do something right the first time, you have to allow yourself to grow into whatever it is you're doing, because we're still growing. Like, we are always growing, essentially. Um, so I think that's been really important for me in my journey, especially in anthropology, where I didn't really know that much, but people seem to know a lot more about theory. And so I had to just kind of sit with it and be like, why is this important? What is it that I'm trying to do with this? So that's important. And then one of the most important experiences that I've had at college, I think the most important experience that I had that kind of fused everything together for me was my sophomore spring. I worked at the ART, at the American Repertory Theater, as a music assistant on a brand new show called We Live in Cairo. And it was a professional show, and I was like the stupid little intern sitting and hoping for the best. And I got to work with Daniel and Patrick Lazor, as well as Madeline Smith, who were just like so gracious and kind to me. And I got to work with a literal veteran in theater, Michael Starobin, who's like is an orchestrator who's done pretty much every Sondheim musical. It and I just kind of realized that I started to realize that it's possible to do what you love and to continue to do it and be paid for it at some point. And I also came to the realization that, the joys of life are more important than necessarily like having the penthouse or, gaining the biggest check in the world. It's more important to have like a real focus, especially when, sorry, last thing I'll say, I know I'm rambling. That show also was about the Arab Spring. And so I had to do research on the Arab Spring, which is something I didn't know very much about. And that was also a really good coalescence of like, where does culture meet music, meet theater? And how do I, as a theater maker and a music maker of color, participate in that intersection? So.
And Joy, after the pandemic lockdown, you directed one of the first Harvard plays performed on Zoom in June, helping raise around $10,000 to support organizations related to the Black Lives Matter and COVID-19. Can you tell us more about the event and your keys to success in fundraising during these difficult times?
Yeah, so God of Carnage, I directed God of Carnage, which is a French play. Originally, the show, it was done with a entirely white cast, and it's two heterosexual couples having a conversation. I felt that I knew who I wanted to be in the show. I knew it was hysterically funny. It's about, sorry, I didn't say what it was about. God of Carnage is about two couples who have 10-year-old or 11-year-old kids. Who get into a fight. One beats the other with a stick, breaking his teeth. And so the parents have a conversation essentially throughout the entire play to try and settle the score in a civilized way and try to get their kids to make up. But in reality, they realize that they are no more adult than their children. So they argue pretty much for the whole play. And all sorts of chaos ensues. And so usually that show is done live, and there's usually four people and two white heterosexual couples. I knew that I wanted that show to happen because I thought it was hysterical. I knew that I wanted to do something cool with my friends at the beginning of quarantine because I just felt so lonely and wanted to do something fun. And ultimately, it ended up being really meaningful because we ended up having two interracial couples who were queer, two queer interracial couples, so we could have a conversation about one, racial dynamics, and also the intersection of race and sexuality. And I think in having those conversations on stage, as things were happening outside in the world, we were like, it doesn't make any sense for us to put on this show and, be like, guys, check out our theater when the world is on fire. So we felt like it was important to bring out those themes and also do our part to help people who were hurting and are still hurting at that time. So what we did is we picked four different organizations and created a Give Butter account. And it just invited people like crazy to this crazy silly show that we're gonna do, and it ended up working out really well. Mostly because I think people just wanted to have something to root for at that time, and so when we started, like, we made sure the show kept all the things that people really wanted to laugh about, and like, but also turned into the things that people are thinking about at this time. One of my favorite parts of the show is there's one character who throws up on camera and everybody freaks out, and then they have that one person is like about to have a panic attack, so they have this like scene in which one person goes to the other person's room and they turn off all the lights, and like you can't see them but you can hear them, and you just hear somebody like console someone else, and it's goofy and stupid, but like it was crazy that like that was kind of comforting in itself, that like you had somebody else who was feeling that anxiety and feeling that high energy, but somebody else was like feeling that, empathizing with them in a way that I think was really impactful. And ultimately, I think, in terms of donations and trying to get people to donate to these organizations, we made sure that we were continuously reminding people of the cause, what we were trying to do, posting a lot on its social media, as well as talking about it a lot in the chat of the show, to be like, this, do you love this show? You should also donate. And it 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 was great. It was a really fulfilling experience at the end to see that people had donated and had cared so much for other lives at this time.
And Joy, as the president of BlackCAST and as the former inclusivity chair of Harvard's Black Student Association, do you feel our country is moving forwards or backwards in terms of ending racial inequalities and injustices? And what are some things that our youth can do and should do in order to achieve this goal?
I think that right now we're at an interesting crossroads. I'm actually writing my thesis about this a little bit. Like, I think that we're in a movement that is questioning structures, that have been put in place with the Constitution of this country. And I feel like we could essentially stall. I mean, people have been running really hard to try and get Trump out of office and trying to get Biden in office. And I think they're going to keep running until they get Biden in office. But then it's going to be a question mark as to whether people recognize that Joe Biden, although he is, a good, kind man, more generally, he still can't fix the things that are central to the American identity, right? And in order for those things to get fixed, I think we have to keep questioning and educating ourselves as young people, so that when it comes time that we have a little more agency, we can create a more comfortable and safer place. And that said, like, I think my dream would be that after Joe Biden gets inaugurated, that people who felt so passionately about Black Lives Matter, and also, climate change, and, just social inequities in general, will feel compelled to keep their politicians that they've just elected accountable for the things that are going to make people most comfortable and most safe, and equitable in this country. And so as young people, I think it's mostly about organizing, trying to always face outward and recognize, what kind of privileges do we have? Like, for me, I'm an artist. I get to, make things, and I could certainly be in a space where I can make things and not turn out and be like, this is just something I like to make just for fun. But that feels irresponsible to me right now. But I think it's important that we always recognize, like, that's a privilege to make art. It's a privilege to be able to study at Harvard. It's a privilege to be living where I'm living and to be safe right now. And what can I do as a young person, or with my money or with my time, to make things a little more equitable for other people who are hurting right now?
And I think that's so important to sort of remember that it's getting into office, but then also continuing with that same passion throughout to make sure that there is that change.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay, with your experience working with youth, what is one of the biggest strengths of today's youth that one can leverage to become leaders and to make a difference in our world?
Yeah, I think the young people today are, first of all, we're crazy. We're talking so much. We have so many different things happening right now. I just got on Clubhouse. There's all sorts of people, like the way that people organize over social media is insane. but also it's really powerful that people feel so moved. I think the key, that's definitely one of the biggest strengths, that like trends and stuff like that catch fire so much more quickly right now. And I think that's a really great thing to use, like TikTok is a force. And the way in which like you can make, a dance popular, you can easily make a vote popular as well, or a donation popular as well. Because at the end of the day, like everything that's happening or is related to money in some way. So when you force people to make some sort of investment, whether it's through, if I get this, if I do this, I'll get famous on TikTok. If I do this, blah, 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 like it'll affect. You find a way to make whatever the trend is affect someone else's life so that you can make the trend important and meaningful, I think.
And Joy, what would your advice be for teens who are aspiring to become scholars and leaders like yourself?
Um, Biggest advice. I think my biggest advice would be stay true to yourself, listen to yourself. And I think also it's important that when you have a conversation with, when you're trying to connect with people as a leader, it's important that you listen to the other person's actual meaning of their words, and understand where they're coming from rather than just to respond. I think that's been really important for me as a director. When I'm talking to an actor, for example, or I'm talking to a designer and I'm like, we should do this other person is going to give me whatever makes the most sense to them based off of what they've learned, where they've come from, who they are, rather than what I've learned and where I come from and what I know. So it's important that when you're having a conversation with someone or you're trying to lead a group, you need to know the truth that somebody else is giving to you rather than the truth that you would hope that they have. And I think also, like on a larger scale, uh, politicians and the powers that be in this country have to participate in that as well, because I think a lot of times American politics tend to care more about the politics than the actual truth of American lives. So it's important to do those things and meditate, take care of yourself. That's really important.
Joy, thank you so much for your phenomenal service, and thank you so much for your time today and answering all of our questions.
Thank you so much. This has been great.